Aloha and welcome to Voices of Papahānaumokuākea. I'm Naiʻa Lewis, and over the next hour we hope to inspire you with the great work being done by individuals and agencies to protect one of the largest marine areas in the world. Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument stretches beyond Kauai to the northwest. It was expressly created to protect an exceptional array of natural and cultural resources. As we celebrate the 15 years since the designation of Papahanaumokuakea as a Marine National Monument, we explore different aspects of Native Hawaiian stewardship over this sacred region through mele, or song, moʻolelo, story, and mana'o, or sharing of ideas. Starting with mele from renowned singer and haku mele Kainani Kahaunaele singing No Pihemanu, a mele written with other haku mele on a trip to Pihemanu, or Midway Island.
He aloha e ka lahiki, ohu ohu I ka ehukai. Me ka leo o liona manu, I ka maka o nohi ula. Pulupe I ka uanui, I ka haumai a ka ulumano. Hauke uke ka hulumanu, hauke ke ike anu anu. He punana he nu amanu, he aloha ua ho'i mai. He punana he nu amanu, he aloha ua ho'i mai. Hali I moi o ne o ke kaiea, e hahani aku I ka hale manu. Uli e kalima I lalo, ulua e ke oho ka velu. Ki ka ha mai ke ka upu, manu hehi ale o ka moana. He hali ala he ha upu, I ke po'i ale ale o nanalu. He punana he nu amanu, he aloha ua ho'i mai. He punana he nu amanu, he aloha ua ho'i mai. Lei ana o Ailā na hikina, I ka nani o ka puanohu. O ka ohu ku ha'aheo, a ke kahela ua ana ia. Holo ana I ke kai kua'au, ani ani aku I ke kai lulu. Halulu mai ke kai o waho, he nu anu ai ka pale kai. He punana he nu amanu, he aloha ua ho'i mai. He punana he nu amanu, he aloha ua ho'i mai. Puana mai ke aloha, nona moku o Pihemanu. Me ka leo o liona manu, I ka maka o nohi ula. He punana he nu amanu, he aloha ua ho'i mai. He punana he nu amanu, he aloha ua ho'i mai.
Mahalo Kainani, that was such a beautiful way to honor our ancestral legacy. What began as a series of video recorded interviews is now the Voices of Papahānaumokuākea, a documentary film about the formative history of Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, told from the perspectives of 8 Native Hawaiian community leaders who were part of a movement that resulted in the effective advocacy and protection for the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. These oral histories share insights into Native worldview and the relationships between people and place. Over time, Native Hawaiians have greatly influenced and informed the way management is structured and how Hawaiian culture is appropriately incorporated into the management of Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. Tonight, immediately following the film's premiere, we will welcome Kekuewa Kikiloi and Brad Kaʻalelo to share their hopes for the future of what we all can learn from this very special place. And now, Voices of Papahānaumokuākea.
I became connected with not only Papahānaumokuākea, but all of our marine resources from birth, pretty much. My family, as well as the family of my wife, are from fishing families for many generations. And in the mid-90s, we decided to put our business aside and see what we could do to volunteer in protecting the marine resources, try to give something back. And I became involved in the state's bottom fish task force, which was created to address the decline in deep sea bottom fish known as the Deep Seven in the main Hawaiian Islands, which is the ʻAulani, also known as onaga, Paka, lehi, hapu'upu'u, and a few other species. And we came up with a recommendation to shut down 20% of our fishing grounds to hopefully ensure the preservation of some of the breeding stock for the future generations. Well, in northwestern Hawaiian Islands, the worst impact was from the lobster fishery. Westpac and National Marine Fisheries Service in that area crashed the lobster fishery once in the mid-90s, and rather than shutting it down, they reopened the fishery and just caused more devastation to the lobster stocks, and they crashed it again. And instead of stopping the fishery at that point, they allowed the retention of buried females. Nowhere in the world has that ever been allowed except for in Hawaii. So you can see by that they have no concern about sustainability of the resource. They just want to maximize the money they can while they can. And when they got to that point, I decided to try and take action, and that's when I was like in a moment of possession. I stayed up for 2 days straight, no sleep, writing a draft management plan to see if we could get control away from Westpac and National Marine Fisheries Service in that area. So our kuleana is to malama before we can benefit from the resources. The state has control over the waters from the shoreline out to 3 miles, and then the federal government controls from 3 miles out to 200 miles. So in state waters, it's the most sensitive of all waters. So we felt, why protect the more distant waters on the deeper side and not the most sensitive waters? Let's work on trying to establish strong protections similar to what the Coral Reef Ecosystem Reserve contained. So we met with Linda Lingo on 2 separate occasions. We explained how the monk seals were an endangered species and how they were starving and dying. Hopefully they wouldn't go extinct. And we explained that those waters are home to the honu, or green sea turtle. They spawn and have their babies up there. So that is a very important area to protect. So over several meetings and explaining to her that is our only insurance policy for food in case our imports of food get cut off. Eventually she decided to protect that area as a marine life refuge instead of fishery management area. So we were probably just as excited That happened as we were aware that the coral reef ecosystem reserve was created because it protected the more sensitive nearshore waters. We got to do what we got to do to protect our natural resources for future generations. But that's the main reason I get involved in doing this stuff, is preservation of the resources for future generations. Just because it's here today doesn't mean we need to take it all. You know, my mom always told me that growing up that the fish, I was fishing from young kid time, so she told me the fish don't belong to us, so just remember that they belong to the future, so we can borrow what we need now, but don't damage that resource. Our Northwest Hawaiian Islands are the eldest of all our islands, and as we respect human beings, we respect our kupuna, and I think that same sort of respect should be extended towards Ailā to the northwest, which is our kupuna Ailā. Eventually, like our human kupuna, those islands will cease to exist. They eventually go under the water and then are no more. So I think we need to respect those islands just as we do our human elders, and keep in memory the ones that disappear, keep them in our memory of what they provided to us.
The mana'o of the kupuna that came before us was to bring the place to the people and not the people to the place. And so understanding that that's the instructions that we were given, because it is very sensitive, it is very spiritual, so we need to protect it at all levels. And the real lesson for, as I said, anyone who's been there is we got to look at our own backyards and see what we're doing. Why has it lost its spirituality? Why don't the birds fly eye to eye with us? Why don't the fish swim up to us and ask us the question of, who said you could swim with me? I had the unique opportunity of being invited by a friend to fly to Midway and check out the commercial fishing operation that was part of the Midway experience at the time. So being able to land on Midway and really jump in the water was an eye-opening experience, because the fish there tended to be very, very large compared to my lifetime experience in the waters around Hawaii, the main Hawaiian Islands. So that was a very unique experience, and also the fact that the fish were not afraid. Big ulua would swim up to you and give you attitude, basically. So just seeing that and experiencing the spirit of the place, was something that was very exciting. So when I had the opportunity to participate in the advocating for the creation of the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands Coral Reef Ecosystem Reserve with folks like Vicky Hotakamini and Isaac Harp and Kobazi Agard, I jumped at the chance, because I knew that it was a very special place. It was being mistreated by the commercial fishing, and it had been mistreated in the past with the harvest of albatross eggs and albatrosses and seals. So we needed to do something about that. We could be protecting the last place that coral will be alive in the Pacific. So when you think on a decadal or a century basis, if all the predictions about global warming and ocean acidification occurs, it will be the last place in the Pacific in which the genetic material will reside for when things cool off again. From a spiritual perspective, it is that place of awe and po, and the recognition that our tutus were able to understand the equinox, and then to put that in relation to the procedure for the afterlife. That's also good to understand, regardless of what sort of religious background you have. The idea that you have a reserve that will be this biological bank, if you will, or insurance policy, if you will, is something that is very, very important. Then there's the ability to make the connection and learn. So oftentimes in the main Hawaiian Islands, you're so urbanized, you're so disconnected from the Aina and the Kai, that you aren't able to have that relationship. Go and experience that relationship and then use that to energize, inspire the desire for protection in the main Hawaiian Islands, right?
In all my life, all the places that I've gone throughout Hawaii, statewide, there isn't a place that comes close to the amount of mana and just the feelings that you feel from that place. Having that ability to connect to that place in that way is why I do what I do today. In 2002, there was a pretty epic cruise called the Nā 2002 cruise. That cruise was a 30-day cruise, went to every single island, atoll, submerged. So we went to all 10 up there. We had contracted a vessel called the Rapture. There was over 60 of us on that vessel, and they had represented different disciplines. So there was the invert guys, there was the fish guys, there was the terrestrial guys, there was the documentation team, coral people. And so everybody had a role on the ship. That was my first time up to Papahanaumokuakea, and all the times that we've taken people up there, it's that interaction, it's that inspiration that they gather from that place that changes them. It's life-changing to make them do what they do now. And people don't understand that until they get to experience that. And that's why that place is so special, because I've never been to a place that can actually touch that many people in that kind of way. I got to meet a lot of people from all different places, from all different backgrounds, especially our community in our Lahui. So then, once I started meeting all those people, it made me want to push on and do the things that we had set out to do. So the fight that we had with incorporating culture, Native Hawaiian culture, into the management structure of Papahanaumokuakea, it's like unheard of at that time. To have Hawaiian words in regulation, never, ever. But going to DC to help write those regulations was something that I was a part of. And to know that certain words like pono was incorporated into that we had backing from William Ailā and people like Halealoha, with all of those people in our community that were well respected, that supported us and supported this whole vision, was enough for us to continue on. The management side of that, though, was very difficult in fighting, because you have a whole lot of federal agencies that you gotta work with, federal, state, government agencies that don't incorporate those things. And to hear it coming from a federal agency, from these bunch of Hawaiians inside there, and we were called many things at that time, by the way. Hawaiian was not necessarily one of them in that positive light. You know, there were words like traitor, there were words like coconuts, I mean, all kind words people called me. And last time I checked, I'm not one of those things, right? So I'm thinking, like, why would they say that? After being in the agency for a while, I understood what the purpose was. So what I've learned is, if we're not in the game, we're not playing a part in the game, how are you gonna direct where the game is gonna go? And how are you gonna get to the accomplish of winning the game, right? So the strategy is you put people on the inside so they can help to influence and direct the path and the process that it's going down. As long as they're incorporating all of the feedback that's coming from the community, right? That is what we were driven to do. I am proud, I mean, truly deep down, knowing the things that we've been able to accomplish as a team. Back in the day when I first started, did I ever think that we'd be able to accomplish that much? Probably not. I didn't know what was ahead, but now we know. that these things are not always that far away, that if you work hard enough, that if you do the right things, that if you meet the right people, that you can get things done. And that places like this will be perpetuated and protected for, hopefully, into perpetuity. That's the hope. That's the legacy we want to leave. That people will respect this place, that people will understand, that people will make connections, that they'll want to know that this is a part, and they will know that this is a part of our Hawaii and our planet.
Yeah, I have an 8-year-old, and a couple months ago he asked me, "Mama, can you tell me a story about what the world was like before the climate changed?" Sit with that for a minute. Papahanaumokuakea is what the world was like before the climate changed. Papahanaumokuakea, even though it is impacted by ocean acidification, by bleaching, by microplastics and macroplastics, by having to heal from intrusions of military use through 2 world wars, and the list goes on. Still, because of the resilience of Kanaloa, gives us a memory in real time of what kind of abundance we should be having and the relationship we should be having with the natural world. For me, I had been involved in a very early discussion on a transnational or transboundary discussion for the Lion Islands. So I had lucky enough that Bishop Museum had asked me to come and try to facilitate this meeting. And that was my first experience with World Heritage, looking at how do you bring communities together. So I had learned a little bit, but then when the idea came up and this push came up to explore World Heritage, and then lo and behold, the United States was looking at actually participating and putting forward a site for the first time in many, many years. What we're trying to do is a natural cultural application. So I land in Brasilia Airport, and I was coming in the last. Former trustees Apoleona and Stender were there, and Clyde Namuo, the former, I guess CEO was his title at the time. And we were having this conversation in the pregame war, and Trustee Apoleona, she's sitting there, and she's like, I know this is how things are happening. And like, yes, there's these strategies, and we need one. And, Ambassador, I really respect this, so we'll do whatever. But, our kupuna had more treaties with the rest of the world than anyone else at the time of our kingdom. So, aloha, that's like the base of good diplomacy. And again, lesson. And she's right. So what happened is, with aloha as a lead, to just see people as who they are, going around these different delegations to basically say, hey, this is who we are, this is what we're bringing, we hope you heard it, here's the brochure if you haven't heard about it, we would really appreciate your support. To countries that are not inclined to support the United States, but a little bit of aloha went a long way. And all of a sudden, there was an openness and a change in how that happened. So that was amazing. So much so that we get onto the stage. So it says United States, kind of interesting. Our ambassador, Trustee Stender, Trustee Apoleona, and myself, sitting there behind this thing, and they make this announcement and they vote, and it's unanimous, and they turn it over to our ambassador, and our ambassador basically says, I'm gonna turn it over to these guys, and hands me the mic. You're like, again, how many times does the United States turn over the mic to let our people speak for ourselves? And that was one of these things, is that through World Heritage, through UNESCO, through this opportunity to be World Heritage, we're able to sit and have a voice at an international table and be counted as equals at the table in this international realm. It was so powerful. Papahanaumokuakea not only gave us hope and a reflection of what abundance truly should look like, and what our akua really envisioned our world to be for us, but it gave us the space to then see ourselves and how we would make decisions in a place of abundance. And then to believe in ourselves again, that we were worth that. We're not worth the worst lands. We're not worth the places no more water. We're not worth areas that are degraded and constantly being degraded. Our ancestors, our kupuna, our akua, had so much more for us and created us to be so much more than what recent history, and a very short history, given our entire history on this planet, a very short amount of time. We forgot all those generations really quick. So how can we forget these last couple really quick and remember what not only our Hawaiian universe is worthy of, but what the entire world is worthy of, and what we are worthy of. No more. Enough already of the belief in anything less, and we cannot perpetuate that part. We have to just, as much as day-to-day data and information tell us otherwise, we have to see beyond. And Papahanaumokuakea and this journey, I believe, has allowed, I know for me personally, but for a number of people that have taken this journey, I know that's true too. Because once you are able to have that kind of sight, we look at where we are differently. And you can choose to then go, oh, look how terrible it is over here. Like, we saw that and it's so terrible. Instead, most people return with more hope and optimism, because now we see what it can be like, right? Not exactly the same, but what Aina Momona really should be like, and put an appetite in us to want that again. And not sit around and do nothing, but be active and re-believe in all of those levels of ourselves, natural and supernatural, to reclaim it.
Aloha, my name is Naiʻa Lewis, and I'm a community member here on behalf of the Hawaiian community, and I used to work for Papahanaumokuākea in various capacities, and I still participate when I can on the Native Hawaiian Cultural Working Group. The reason Papahanaumokuākea has been able to make the kind of difference that it has is because it is large scale, as well as sacred, as well as important from a scientific perspective. But it really is this scale that has allowed the site to be on a global stage. And because it's on a global stage, that is what has opened the doors for the work that the staff has done, for partners have done, to address issues that then have so much ripple effect and change. Because I mean, if you think about it, right, in a Hawaiian sense, reef over in Kahana, right, or maybe, you know, a sacred forest, you know, ʻAulani here in Nu'uanu, those places are sacred too. I mean, I guess you could make an argument of why Papahanaumokuakea is more sacred, but it's really not a matter of more or less, right? And that's what I'm saying. It's really the context that it is one of those places that can be on the world stage, that then therefore opens the doors to have discussions that are transformative on a global stage. But I also think there's just a deep mana there, a spirituality that no matter what background you come from, you feel that there. And I think once you've been touched by that kind of mana, it does change who you are. Papahanaumokuakea obviously is one of those places that isn't going to be like the Great Pyramids or Machu Picchu. It has that significance, but people can't go there. But it is representative of that level of mana that just changes who you are as a person. Like I said, it doesn't matter what your racial, ethnic, or cultural background is. You're just impacted by it because that vast wilderness is just so amazing. I mean, you'd have to just be like a robot not to be impacted by that. I remember one time, I think we were near Whales Skate, maybe French Frigate Shoals, and we all got out and we were snorkeling around. And so to be at like waist level water, to look around, just to have vast expanse between you and the sky and the horizon, like I said, it gives you context, right? And the scale of who you are as this little individual human. And that, like, I don't see how that couldn't impact anybody. And it's those moments when I'm here in the populated world, when I'm stressed out or I'm trying to remember what's important, I completely go right back to that moment, and I'm in that space, right? That the value that all individual human beings have. And in some ways, like the lack of value too, right? To be humble, that we're not all that, and yet at the same time, we are in some ways, right? One person can make a huge difference if you choose to focus your intent.
I've always been interested in doing like kind of multidisciplinary approaches, and so even though my degree was in archaeology, I used a lot of historical or ethno-historical resources to sort of reconstruct the past. I believe that archaeology is just one way of viewing the past, and that's through the material record, you know, the actual tangible things that were left behind. And that's a powerful way of understanding the past. But here in Hawaii, we have this huge archive of information that our kupuna left us in the Hawaiian language newspapers and, you know, smaller manuscripts and different archival materials. And so it's really important for us to tap into that evidence as well. And so during the process, I think the most important step forward was just trying to identify the island names. Because when I first started researching it as an intern, that was the biggest roadblock, was that there was no names. And if you don't have names, you can't really query information, right? And so, you know, today we pop open Google and we look for, you know, we want to know something, we just type it right in. But what happens if you don't even know what to call the subject matter, right? Which is the islands itself. And you only know these names that started from the 1800s. You're only going to get information from the 1800s from that context. And so by trying to find the original island names, that really opened up the doors to the sort of the deeper history of the place. There's no greater place to me. I've been to a lot of places in Hawaii, worked in resource management jobs that have taken me to all places in Hawaii, some of the most remote places. And none of them really compare to the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, in my opinion, because it is so wild and so pristine in its most rawest form of nature that you don't get that level of heightened spiritual connection, at least in my experiences in other places in Hawaii. I mean, definitely you do reach spiritual connection and important connection to places in the main Hawaiian Islands, but in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, it's just alive in all ways, from the birds flying and circling around your head trying to interact with you, to the way the wind blows, or the smells that you smell out there. You know, I mean, all of your senses are just heightened in all kinds of ways in those environments. And so to me, that's the sort of the closest I've sort of felt to kupuna, I guess. And that's how they understood it in the past, and that's how they saw those islands, as kupuna islands. The other, probably the most important time in my life on one of those trips was going on the island in 2010, trying to complete my field work, and just getting close to like a breakdown almost over there, because realizing that like going with a whole group of people is one thing, but then when it comes to the thought of you being left on the island and the ship leaving, it becomes a totally different thing. You start to get worried, doubt creeps into your mind, fear, you know, and the island is like so powerful. Like it just is this ancient power over there that you get nervous, you know, you get nervous. It's this raw, unfiltered kind of feeling. And so I remember there was sort of this moment where I was just thinking to myself, can I do this? Like can I really, are you ready for this? Like, I mean, because we had landed, we were getting all of our stuff up onto the camping point, which is like 200 feet in elevation. So we're carrying buckets, jugs of water, camping gear, all that stuff for almost 1 month stay up there, which is crazy. And then I remember when the boat's leaving, I thought to myself, like, this is a sinking feeling in me. Like, okay, now, things are now it's real, yeah. And then I had to really kind of dig deep and think, like, okay, I need to make this happen, like, no matter what. This is like my trial by fire, because I've never really been scared like that in my life. There's nothing in my life that has ever made me think like, I'm actually scared to be alone to do this, like totally fearful. And I had to sort of overcome it in my mind and think like, I need to muster up every ounce of courage and ask my grandfather and all of my kupunas to be here with me to get me through this, because this is not gonna go away. This beast like is right in front of me and it's like staring me down. So either I'm gonna fight it or I'm just gonna give up, and what's it gonna be, right? So I ended up, surviving and getting all my work done. But there's definitely, that was a turning point in my life where whenever I doubt myself now, I always think back to that moment of how scared I was and how I forced myself to overcome it. And I think if I could overcome that feeling that I had at that point, this is nothing. So things like the PhD, writing the book, I get scared of those things, but I always rooted myself back into that experience of being at Moku Mana Mana and feeling that fear. And I thought to myself, I can get over it. If I could get over that, there's not too many things that can stop me, because there's that kind of fear that either makes or breaks you, I feel.
I was an intern at Bishop Museum, and I interned at the same time as Kekuewa Kikiloi, and he was working on a project looking at the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. And I got to do a little research around that, specifically into mele, connected with any of the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands and some moʻolelo, and looking at Hawaiian language resources. They have some very famous Hawaiian language resources like Antipat, but there was still more that needed to be done, and so they utilized some of the students, myself included, to do some of that research. Having been able to see physically and experience some of those things also helped when I got to go to Moku Mana Mana and to contextualize and to even imagine what that Aina was when it was in active use by our kupuna. Once I experienced that Aina and that ocean, I all of a sudden had more kuleana. I had to, in some way, convey that experience, in some way support those things that I saw out there, our kupuna, and just the vibrancy of that aina and that kai. And so it was after that first voyage that I started getting more involved in the Culture Working Group. And the Culture Working Group has been really pivotal in providing Hawaiian voices, Hawaiian guidance, Hawaiian advocacy to manage that area well and to continually improve on the management of what is now called Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. That's the way we used to do it as Native Hawaiians across our entire Pai Aina, right? And our engagement with Aina was, we managed it ourselves through cultural norms, right? Through kapu, through lahui, through these systems that helped us regulate our engagement with Aina. We had konohiki helping in that respect. And in many respects, makainana ourselves could understand and know deeply what was best, sort of, not just for ourselves, but for the larger system that we lived in. Since that time, we have in so many ways moved away from the managed engagement with Aina. As in, any healthy democratic society, there are multiple voices on what should happen, how it should happen up in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So just from looking at the Native Hawaiian portion of management, immense complexity. At the same time, huge opportunity, just balancing sort of the interests, because anything that we do in society is going to have those multiple interests. Realizing that because it is no one's one hanau, that I think we give each other a little bit more flexibility as Native Hawaiians around those decisions. But pulling those things together and coming up with a management approach, it can be challenging, but I think also looking at what has been done so far, pretty awesome, yeah.
My connection, it started in 2008. I had just graduated from UH Hilo and had moved on to Kamakaku for my graduate degree. And I had heard of this class, Traditional Marine Resource Management class. Just saw a flyer, thought it would be an interesting conversation to listen in on. And I talked my way in because I said, oh, I don't need a seat. I just want to be a part of the conversation and hear what you guys are talking about as far as traditional marine resource management. And it was through those conversations on that trip. We were up there for 10 or 14 days, can't remember, talking about responsibility and kuleana and what that meant for Hawaii and how do we flush the system with, not only with our own people, but with our ideas and our values and our roles. We have this kind of value where when we go up there, we are doing extension work. It's not something we do 10 days out of the year and then come back and go back to our normal lives. It's part of what we do every single day. And when we go up there, we are just an extension of what we do back home. And honor the fact that it's not only doing the work, but you're giving back. This is not something that we go up and do and then it's done and dusted. Training another generation, pulling more people in. I knew now that I was aware that these islands existed, they now became a part of our universe, part of our world, so now they're part of our responsibility. Conservation and management is one thing. And where the journey has brought conservation and management for Hawaii, that's all the culmination of a work of many, many people. But that conversation never existed 10 years ago. Or it didn't, but in very, very small pockets. So, you know, if one of my beliefs is have that place, remember that it's still family. And it's not being I don't look at it as being disrespectful, because we still watch what we say. And as our relationship grows, and I tell people, when you go to your grandma's house, you can go look in the cupboards and you open the fridge and you do whatever you like. But when you bring people in with you, you don't do that. You introduce them formally and you say, Grandma, this is so and so. And then when they spend 5 more days with Grandma, then they can do that too. And then you start getting comfortable. So I treat places in that same way. When they places become family to me, by myself, I will behave. And then when I bring people in, it's at a different kind of level. And there's different protocol, and there's different formalities. And then when they settle into family and they understand family, then they determine their own relationship. And I think that's important with Papahanaumokuakea. It cannot and it should never ever be a vahikapu in that sense. So that's one layer. To be able to go there, to remind us that they're family, and to remind them that they still have family. That's one of the layers. And the other is just straight presence. Those are our places. Those are our what I call our kiniakua, our resources. Those are our ainas, all of those spaces. And what makes it Hawaii is the relationship and the roles. And if those disappear, it's no longer. So it's important for us to be present. So for me, Papahanaumokuakea for our people is a way to go, enough is enough. Papahanaumokuakea for our people is a way to go and remember. Papahanaumokuakea for me, in my childlike mind, is a place for heroes to go be heroes. When we talk about access, no, not everybody needs to be up there. Not for the reasons why other people say it, because you need to work for it. Papahanaumokuakea shouldn't be the open door every Hawaiian have access to. Everybody has access to. It should be an earned place. But think about it. Those are where our heroes come from. That's where our genealogies come from. Yeah. All of our genealogies start from up there and come and work their way down. We are able to do the work that we do because of the work of many others that have come before. And we are only doing the work to allow for more work to happen in the future.
Welcome back. That was really powerful to watch a lot of our colleagues share their reflections about their time in Papahanaumokuakea. And we're really excited to have a few special guests with us to contribute to this discussion. Kekuewa Kikiloi is one of the voices featured in our video. He's an associate professor and director of Kamakakua Center for Hawaiian Studies at UH Manoa and did his doctoral thesis on moku manamana in Papahanaumokuakea. He also serves as the chair of Papahanaumokuakea Native Hawaiian Cultural Working Group. Joining Kekuewa, we also have ʻOha Papahanaumokuakea Specialist Brad Kaʻalelo Wong, who is a current vice chair of the Papahanaumokuakea Monument Management Board, comprised of ʻOha, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA, and DLNR. And they all work cooperatively for the management of the monument. Welcome to you both. So, first, Kekuewa, to you, why is it important for us to hear voices of Papahanaumokuakea now?
Well, I think because so much time has passed. This movement to protect the Northwest Hawaiian Islands has been going on for over 20 years now. We felt that it was important for us to start documenting the voices of different people that were involved, different leaders at different points in time in the history of this movement. And so it's a real opportunity for us to capture at least the Native Hawaiian component of how this place came to be so protected today.
Brad, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, one thing I do think about is, when we do a lot of our management work in Papahanaumokuakea, specifically us at ʻOha, we like to look back to a lot of the moʻolelo ka'au, these stories of the Northwest Hawaiian Islands and people's travels and existences there. And, we see things like this as kind of that continuation of moʻolelo. So I think that's super valuable to have this sort of thing recorded in that way.
So, Kekuewa, just as a follow-up to that, because your work in archaeology is really looking at the moʻolelo, right, of our kupuna. And so for you, what component of that really stands out, I guess, as a message for the Native Hawaiian community to really take note of at this time?
I think a lot of the traditional stories of these remote islands has to do with it being a place of the gods, the place where gods dwelled and originated from before they migrated to the main Hawaiian Islands. And so knowing that, I think it's imperative for us to continually be vigilant in protecting these islands and advocating for its protection.
Protection of Papahanaumokuakea is so critical, and so that's the role that ʻOha really plays as one of the managing entities. And so, how can management structure of Papahanaumokuakea be used as an example for other places across Hawaii or even the world?
For ʻOha as a co-manager at the highest level of management within Papahanaumokuakea, it's important for us because it affords an ability for us in Hawaii to advocate for Native Hawaiian interests at this highest level of management. For this place to be a traditional area for Native Hawaiians, I think it's important that we have some sort of say or governance, if you will, of this area, and it's important to kind of continue that in perpetuity as it was. And as far as using this kind of model, it's for us it's very beneficial because people bring different expertise to the table as far as NOAA with their ocean research and fisheries management, Fish and Wildlife Service with their bird management, and obviously ʻOha with our bringing the people to the table. Yeah, that's where I see ʻOha kind of coming in and bringing the people, bringing our cultural heritage and our mana'o to Papahanaumokuakea in this way. So, I see a lot of areas in the main Hawaiian Islands. It's very, very difficult to manage land, and when you collaborate in this type of way, I think it gives us a better opportunity to not necessarily focus on our mandates, but also focus on the place itself, right? Of making that important.
So I'm gonna just pull on that a little bit too. You know, the place is so important. So if anyone in the world, let alone the Native Hawaiian community, is actually gonna be able to physically go to Papahanaumokuakea. So, you know, Kekuewa, how does an oral history project like this create an impact and a bridge between community and management body and a place that is literally thousands of miles away?
Yeah, you know, I mean, this kind of efforts, like this video today, this show today, these types of oral history projects, they all, you know, sort of bring the stories, sort of the imagery, the feel of the place to the larger community that might never get a chance to go to these remote islands. It's really difficult, I think, as I would say, you know, working with the management agencies for them to sort of get that message across, right? Because these places are so distant, so far away. Different types of outreach efforts is really important to constantly engage the public and keep them connected on these issues. Examples of this is like when I was doing my research as a graduate student, I must have done at least like 80 presentations in the community to try to talk about the cultural history of this place, to just try to bring some kind of awareness to our communities that, you know, this is a part of our islands, that Las Vegas is not the 9th island, and that the 9th island is Nihoa, and there's actually a whole bunch of more islands that are going up the chain. And so, you know, I think we need to constantly remind the public about that.
Well, I think, you know, Voices of Papahānaumokuākea has done such a good job in order to provide more resources for the Native Hawaiian community to learn about this amazing place. So Brad, what do you think, like, what are you most hopeful for as we move forward as a legacy of this series?
I mean, kind of touching on what I was mentioning earlier, and even what Kekuewa was saying about imagery too, you know, it's really hard to care about a place if you can't be there, right? And so the more we can show images of the place, show people's experiences, try to relate to people in a more personal level. To me, I think that helps to kind of build a personal connection with people and to show them that this place is important for us to malama in a specific way, and that we have a kuleana to take care of it in a specific way. And so for the future, I'm just hopeful that we can always continue to think of that place as in Aina Kua, as Kekuewa had mentioned, and to continue to, I think, build off the lessons learned, whether that's through research or our cultural connections, build off of that to bring it back to the main Hawaiian Islands. So I'm always hopeful that we can continue to do that.
Well, as we wrap this up, I'd like to kind of reconnect that management component with Indigenous peoples. And so that as this becomes more prevalent, right, you know, to the world, also to the nation, you know, what do you guys think is the biggest lesson learned from your experiences, you know, personally thus far in Papahanaumokuakea?
I think one of the major lessons is that, you know, we can work together towards a common good. You know, I mean, there's sort of this assumption that, you know, management agencies and communities always have to be in conflict. But if done correctly, if done in a way that builds trust, you know, we can work together towards a common goal and achieve that goal. And it can be of pretty major proportions, you know, like Papahanaumokuakea is not a small conservation achievement. It's a major global achievement. You know? So, you know, that's always something that I think Hawaii has as a feather in its cap, you know, as a major accomplishment that we were able to do this together.
As representative for the managing agency, do you want to kind of wrap us up here? What's the last word, Brad?
You know, what I was thinking about from his answer, for me, I think what's really important is, you know, I guess it's for us as Native Hawaiians too, our cultural traditions are extremely important and can be used in a management context, right? We can use that as our foundations. We can have agencies kind of collaborate on things from a cultural perspective, and I think that's super valuable for us to be an example for other places and to say that, yeah, our traditions are here and they're important. They're never going to go away.
So mahalo to you both. I really feel like your perspectives are a great complement to the reflections shared in our film tonight. And we also want to take a moment to mahalo Kainani Kahaunaele for her beautiful mele that started our evening program, and most especially to all of you for being with us tonight. We leave you with this thought. Papahanaumokuakea is connected to Native Hawaiian cultural identity and the traditional customary values, knowledge, and practices that protect and perpetuate Hawaiian lifeways. The Native Hawaiian community continues to access Papahanaumokuakea for various cultural and spiritual practices, which allows them to fulfill their kuleana to advance Hawaiian knowledge systems and inform the collective stewardship work in the inhabited Hawaiian Islands. Papahanaumokuakea has allowed us to remember our inheritance. Ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono. Thank you and a hui hou.
We have something special here. It's not just material, but it's part of our story, our culture. That's how Native intelligence was born. It's a place of inspiration, teaching, sharing. Ohamalama loans provided the kāla we needed so that we could grow. A'ohe hanunui kialuia. Visit loans.oha.org.
Storytelling is a Hawaiian tradition that spans the centuries. Kawaiʻola News is dedicated to sharing the stories of the Hawaiian community. Go to kawaiʻola.news to hear oiwi from across the Pai'aina share their challenges and victories as they move the Lahui forward. View bonus video stories and expanded photo coverage online. Explore Kawaiʻola's story archive sharing important moments in Hawaiian history. Visit and subscribe to kawaiʻola.news. News for the Lahui.